Welcome in, everybody. Another edition of the Coast to Coast. We are not live this week just because there's so much going on with football. And shout out to Tommy Ashley for getting all this stuff scheduled. But we are indeed here, and it is the Coast to Coast podcast. And I am still Joey Powell, and we are still on InsideCarolina.com. And we are still brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. And we appreciate you being here with me as always. Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran. Glad you guys are here. Appreciate you making the time. Sherrell, let's go ahead and jump into it. Was this weekend the best game that you've seen Jacoby Cowan play for North Carolina?
Oh, absolutely. He had a sack. I mean, a huge sack. It was a timely sack.
Man
Yeah,
was in on all kinds of pressures,
there,
which from
there's
his
there's a reason Ohio State wanted him.
I wonder how many people are going to turn the show off right now after hearing that. No, it's we will say that Sherrell, if you guys haven't noticed, my man loves to talk Carolina football, and unfortunately doesn't get to do that much in a podcast setting. So I'm throwing him some pizza crumbs wherever I can. Fellas, we've done these previews so far this year, and I appreciate what you guys have brought to the last two episodes. Let's wrap up today with the guys that have been grad transfers that joined the UNC roster. Those two remaining players are Paxson Wojcik and Cormac Ryan. So if you think about the first four that we did a month ago, the four that we did for the juniors and seniors last month or 2 weeks ago, last episode, then you add these two guys and it's 10 players. And you're saying to me, hey, Joey, there's more than 10 guys on the roster. Yes, but also these are the guys that we expect that will contribute. The other guys are walk-ons or guys that have been added to the roster that are going to basically make up Blue Steel. So forgive us for not noting those guys, but again, we're trying to look at the 10 that are going to most likely make contributions to the Tar Heel roster this year for basketball season. So, in the same format we did with the last two episodes with those groups of four players, tonight we'll talk about these last two, Paxson Wojcik and Cormac Ryan. First, you may remember Paxson Wojcik. He was the first guy to commit to the Tar Heels after the season via the transfer portal from Brown up there in the Ivy League. His dad, years ago, Sean Moran's favorite, Doug Wojcik, coached in North Carolina under Matt Doherty. And so, again, coach's son, all that good stuff. Sean, I'm going to come to you first. I want you to tell me what success looks like for Paxson Wojcik.
Well, what success looks like for Paxson Wojcik, I think, is being a player that Hubert Davis can count off on coming off the bench. I think there's going to be games where maybe he's not getting any minutes, but I think if he's able to carve out a consistent role off the bench, I would consider that a huge win. I think the biggest hurdle will just be in terms of how he adjusts to the increased size and athleticism of ACC basketball and Power 5 basketball in general, coming from Brown for 2 years where he's second team all Ivy as well as Loyola Chicago. He definitely had games playing against UNC, Michigan State, some of the top schools, not to mention practicing against Michigan State players over the past summers with his dad there. But I think the main thing is, can he carve a consistent role off the bench? And if he does, I think part of that will be hitting outside shots and being able to get to the attack the basket when the opportunity presents itself.
And obviously, you make a great point that, Tar Heel fans may say, oh, he's coming from Brown, blah, 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 blah. Remember, he lit North Carolina up, or at least had some serious buckets and a game face on when he played in the Smith Center just a couple of seasons ago. Sherrell, I'll ask you the second question that we've been doing with these previews. What should fans expect from Paxson Wojcik?
So I'm gonna be like one of those announcers who comes up with a cheesy line and like thinks it's funny and laughs at it. But I think
you're stealing my gimmick now, bro.
Yeah. So I think he should be North Carolina CAO, Chief Agitating Officer, because that is what I think he should do. And the other guy we're going to talk about tonight, I think, is one of them. And we talked about Seth Trimble a few weeks ago. But I think those three are who Carolina needs to be the agitators. And what I mean by that is there's not going to be a huge role for them. Well, for two of them, I think, offensively. I think Trimble's, paths and minutes is we've talked about is his defense. I think Wojcik is kind of similar. I think he has to just go in there and just like make a mess of stuff. There are players who develop that as a skill over time.
There's entire teams that do that.
Yeah,
like there's
exactly.
entire squads
Yeah.
that we've seen over the last few years that's their MO.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry to step on you.
No, they agitate, they frustrate, they annoy. And I think that's a counter to the athleticism part because he is going to face guys who are more athletic than him. But what he's got to do, to use a phrase, he's got to get up into the guy on when he's on defense, and he's got to bother him. He's got to make him earn every single thing that he gets. And I think if he's able to do that from the defensive side and then keep his pretty good shooting. I think he was at 38% last year in conference. In the Ivy League, he was up close to 40. So if he can do that, knock down a three every couple games and in his limited minutes just frustrate whoever he's guarding, which would probably be, I would assume, the opposing two. I think if he's having to guard opposing threes, that could get a little dicey. But if he can do that, I think that's success for him. And I think that's what people can expect from him is to agitate and to knock down open shots.
We need to find a way to hashtag and also trademark CAO in case it becomes a thing, right? If that becomes one of the things where Hubert Davis and his staff are deploying Paxson Wojcik in that very much, all right, go piss somebody off role, we need to find a way to work on incorporating CAO into a lot more conversations. Sean?
I think, the other thing is just, once again, these are Ivy League stats, but he did fill the stat sheet, really strong rebounder and was able to push the ball. So I think, once again, in the minutes that he is getting, if he's able to, attack the defensive boards and help initiate the fast break, I think can be extremely helpful. Good steal numbers as well from the defensive end, which Sherrell was mentioning. And I think from a three-pointer perspective, he didn't shoot the ball well as a junior, so he did have a big jump up last year. So I think that's always a question, what is he the junior year shooter or is he the senior year shooter? But I think one number that jumped out when diving into the stats was he was 46% from three on no dribble 3-point jump shots. So I think, once again, going back to the Elliot Cadeau factor, if they're able to produce open jump shots for some of these guys on the perimeter, I think that's one stat to keep in mind, especially for Wojcik, where maybe that's the area offensively that they're trying to identify for him.
Yeah, good call out, Sherrell.
And I'd add too, you talk about specialists, if we're talking about football, there are guys who are in certain packages and they have pretty much one job in that package. And I think for UNC, you could see a closing lineup where you've got someone like Wojcik who's very smart, who's very tried and true, battle tested, who's a pretty solid free throw shooter who you expect to make the right play. You could see him in some situations where North Carolina's kind of holding on to a lead. Maybe they're up 10-12 at the under 4, and they need someone to just come in who can hit a free throw and is not going to turn the ball over and can dribble. So I could see him having a role, like a specialized role, aside from the chief agitating officer role, also as someone who can come in a closing lineup.
Yeah, it's rare that we've seen that from North Carolina to have that kind of guy to go in and play those kind of minutes. But I do think fans would love to see that situation where they do have guys that can go in and hold on to a lead and not melt down and not gag the ball away or create havoc for themselves. And it does seem like Paxson Wojcik could fill that role. The other remaining member that we have yet to profile, Cormac Ryan, and he comes from Notre Dame. Has played on some decent Notre Dame teams, but also has played on some not so good Notre Dame teams, and I think that has affected his performance. Sherrell, I'm going to come to you and ask you what success looks like for Cormac Ryan. And while he may not be the CAO, he is definitely either the vice president of agitation or is on the agitation subcommittee within the company. He has more skills, I think, than that, so he may not have to be relied on to just be a CAO. But he's definitely shown that he's got some agitating tendencies. Yes, you tell me, what does success look like for Cormac Ryan this coming season?
Yeah, he's on the board of governors for the agitators. Let's put it that way.
Fair. All right, that works.
Yeah, I think success for him kind of looks like his junior year profile, where he was a pretty prolific shooter, where he was a good passer. He was on a Notre Dame team that was much better than it was this past season. And I think, it looks like, I don't want to say he's going to take over as the primary wing defender, but he's going to be on the wing a lot, playing a lot of minutes. So kind of de facto, he might be the primary wing defender. So I think he has to continue to agitate. He has to buy in on that side. I think the earlier returns from what we've heard out of Chapel Hill is that he's been really impressive. And just like Wojcik and just like Withers and just like Baycott and Davis and the guys who came out from UNC, all of those guys were embarrassed by their teams last year and how they played. And I think that's been kind of the fuel for them this offseason. I think Ryan, he's not really someone who needs additional fuel, but the fact that he has it is a good thing for UNC. So I think success looks like being able at times to guard the primary wing option on the other team. And again, just like with Withers and Ingram, when you get an open shot, because Cadeau and Davis are going to get you open shots, and to some degree, Baycott knocking them down. So if he can knock them down like he did as a junior, I think it's a really successful season for him.
I hadn't thought about that, but that is a very unique perspective. The fact that not only the UNC players want to get last season out of their mouths, but yeah, Jalen Withers came from a garbage team last year in Louisville. Harrison Ingram, Stanford was not great last year. Notre Dame was somewhat of a garbage team last year. So, I mean, all of these guys could be looking to, I guess, kind of burn the tape from last season. And as you said, also including the guys from UNC who did not make the tournament. So that's a very unique, potentially solidifying or unifying factor that they all might be working with. Sean, I'm going to come to you and help me understand what should fans expect from Cormac Ryan, and you know. Is the easy low-hanging fruit to say, oh, he's going to do the same thing Brady Manick did, or are we looking at more of a real legitimate 3, and should fans expect to get 3 and D out of him instead of the traditional Manick role?
Well, before, in terms of a unifying fact, that could also be a fairly scary fact of everybody coming from teams that did not perform well last season and getting together. But I'll hopefully believe it will create that motivation. Definitely not Brady Manick in terms of what to expect, but I think he's going to have the ability to shoot, but he is more than a shooter. But just staying on the shooting perspective, I think I'm really excited to see how is he going to be utilized in the offense. He can create a little bit for himself off the dribble, but how will UNC use him coming off screens and trying to get him open for good looks at the 3-point line. He's pretty good at attacking, especially on the left hand in terms of a 1-2 dribble pull up jump shot. He can create space in that sense as well. But I think for him, if he's able to get 10 to 12 points, last year he was at 12 points, but if he's in that range, and he's had some games where he's getting consistently double figures. Alabama 29 points in the first round of the tournament, just torched them 2 years ago. So he's capable of having big games, but I think how UNC utilizes him is going to be really important. And then he's definitely not going to be the lockdown defender that Leaky Black was, but I think the hope is what you lose in somebody being able to just take somebody completely out of the game, that he's still able to stay in front, frustrate, create difficulties, but at the same time have that offensive ability where he's going to be a threat. Sometimes he could be the leading scorer of a game, and you wouldn't think twice about it. But I think the consistency on offense will be really important to what he can bring to the table.
I think a lot of people would look at Cormac Ryan and assume certain things about him, but having seen him play in the ACC for quite some time and seen some footage that's come out of early season practice in Chapel Hill, he's not afraid to try to snatch a soul. Sherrell, you had something you wanted to add?
Ed, I think Sean made a great point about how I think the hope for him, not comparing him directly one-to-one to Leaky Black, but from a defensive stopper to someone like him, is that the offense is so much greater that it impacts, the defense. So if you look at his like advanced, numbers, like his defensive rating and his offensive rating, of course,
plus minus too.
Yeah, his best, his best net, between the two was the year that he had the most, the best offensive season. So he's never been his defensive rating has never been under 100, which is kind of baseline. But the year that he was at 117 offensively, which is pretty good, he had a plus 17 rating. So I think that's the goal, is that the defense is going to take a step back because Leaky Black was just that good of a defender. He almost always erased the opposing wing. We saw what he did to Brandon Miller, the number 2 pick in the draft, on and on and on. He guarded everybody from Paolo Banchero to Kihei Clark, 6'10", 250 to 5'11", 145. It didn't matter. Leaky could guard him. But I think what Carolina is hoping is that Ryan is going to be better offensively, and that's going to kind of equal out. So they'll still be kind of similar as far as what they produce. It'll just be in different ways, defensively and offensively.
Yeah, I think that 1-for-1 exchange would be tough for people to see. But to your point, the overall net of what you're getting from the player or the position or both could end up, actually being very, very similar. And I think on the offensive end is where a lot of folks had criticisms of Leaky Black. He finally did start scoring his last year in Chapel Hill, but a lot of folks needed more out of him, specifically 2 years ago when it felt as if sometimes he was kind of that self-check mode. I don't think you'll ever have to worry about that with Cormac Ryan. Guys, I'm gonna lighten the mood a little bit here and really put a nice bow on the show a little bit early, because I know you're both ready to bring back the game show that is sweeping the nation. It's absolutely got listeners and viewers riveted with waiting for the next episode. But that's a new edition of No Cap or Sus. You may have just been tuning into the first Coast to Coast in quite some time. You might be looking at me or listening to me saying, "Hey, Joey, I'm not familiar with this No Cap or Sus, but I've heard lots about it on the streets." Well, we're here for you to let you hear how it goes firsthand. No Cap or Sus is a game where we, the Coast to Coast podcast, and trying to not be so chuggy and be up to date with what the kids are saying nowadays, we're going to bring you No Cap or Sus, wherein we say no cap. That means that is 100% true. I believe in that. That is a real thing. Or if we identify something as sus, that means we have our doubts, or we think that may be untrue or may even be fully false. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say some statements. Sean and Sherrell are going to chime in as to where they think said statement is no cap, or if they think said statement is sus. Gentlemen, are you ready to play?
And
hearing no objections.
We've yet to disagree, so interested to see.
No, we disagreed in the first one, but we did not disagree last week. So our show writers have tried to kind of go back into the lab on their hashtag grind to give some better statements for tonight, so that you guys may actually clash on some of these things and have to think really hard on whether these potential points of contention are no cap or if they are sus. So without further ado, we bring you the next edition. And the first statement we will bring out: Paxson Wojcik will average over 8 minutes per game. Sean Moran, is that statement no cap or is that statement sus?
I will go no cap on that one. I think he will average 8 minutes. That's a good Vegas number, though, because I think you can see some fluctuation, getting maybe 10 to 13 minutes. Other games maybe 1 to 2. There might be a game where he doesn't get any minutes, so that obviously wouldn't count against that 8 minutes. But I think he was the first transfer to commit. I think he's going to be able to prove himself in practice, and I think especially as they're looking to identify what this team is, I think he'll be able to carve out a consistent role early on.
So you're going no cap here?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sean says no cap on that statement. Sherrell, Paxson Wojcik will average over 8 minutes per game. No cap or sus?
I was in my head, I was going to do like a whole Stephen A. Smith thing and call Sean Skip and like go off. But I agree with him. Like, I think 8 is a really good number. Like, I bet he's around 7.9 or 8.3 or something like that. So well done, Joey. But, last year, I think we saw some of the times that, actually it's something we've been saying for years. It's not breaking news, but the currency in which coaches operate is trust. And, to Sean's point, he was the first commit. He's been around, him and Ryan. This is their third school in, I guess, their 6th year of college basketball. And when you are around basketball that much and, you're a coach's son and you've just been around the game your whole life, I feel like, it's easier for you to kind of know what to do in certain situations, like we were talking about earlier. So I think when you're Hubert Davis and you're looking down your bench, it's like, well, who can I trust to go in here and do exactly what I want them to do? And I think for that reason, I think Wojcik gets minutes, and I think it'll be at least 8 a game. So I'm going to say no cap.
Wow, we have agreement and consensus on no cap with another point here on the show. Excuse me. I will say, though I do not have a vote being the host of the show, I would have said sus. But then when Sherrell made his point earlier in the evening about the fact that you could see Paxson Wojcik being deployed in a very specialist role towards the end of games to maintain leads, That may have also swayed me over to the no cap side. So once again, we are unanimous. Blah, blah, blah. We may have to blow up this show. You guys clearly don't care about ratings. Last point in this abbreviated edition of No Cap or Sus. Sherrell, I will come to you first. Cormac Ryan will be starting when the calendar turns to January. Is that statement no cap or is that statement sus?
Oh, that's a good one. Man. This is terrible radio because I'm trying to make up my mind. I'm going to say that is no cap because I think when you start talking about what UNC needs on the wing, he provides a little bit different from someone like Jalen Withers. And I think he, frankly, it's no disrespect to Wojcik. I think he's a better player than Wojcik. And I think there are some things that he does better than Seth Trimble. There's some things that Trimble does better than him. But in the end, I think you have to have Ryan on the court because he is a solid defender. He's proven to be a good shooter. And he does have, 4 years of ACC experience and a year of Pac-12 experience. I think when you add all that together, that I think he will be in the starting lineup, but I think it's probably closer than we all realize. So I'm going to say no cap. He'll be in the starting lineup in January.
All right.
But with a to do a Jason Staples a confidence rating of 0.002.
We're talking thousandths of a percentage point in conference rating there. Sean Moran, Cormac Ryan will be starting when the calendar flips to January. Sherrell has said no cap. Do you believe that is also no cap, or do you believe that statement to be sus?
I will go no cap as well, but with a lot more confidence rating on it. I think I would be extremely surprised if it is a conversation at any point in the season. I think we haven't seen Hubert Davis really make any changes in the starting lineup for the most part over 2 years that haven't been really forced for him to make. And I think Cormac Ryan, just given his experience, and then two, I think what he'll bring to the team offensively and defensively, that he'll be firmly planted in the starting lineup. And if he's not, that is either not a great sign or perhaps one or two players, Withers or one of the younger players, has been playing extremely well. But I would expect him to be a constant and, really the number 3 in terms of scoring threats on the team.
Well, once again, you guys have proved to make a terrible game show out of something that's a great concept because you've agreed once again, though I do appreciate the fact that you had to really consider. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make an audible on the fly. We're going to add one more point. I'm going to come to each of you for a lightning round or a bonus round of no cap or sus, if you will. Sherrell, I'm going to come to you first. This statement, no cap or sus. Johnny T-shirt does not have any really good gear for North Carolina fans. Is that statement no cap or is that statement sus, Sherrell?
I believe the kids would say sus AF is what the kids would say.
That is absolutely sus AF. Sean, I'm going to assume that you're going to agree there because you guys have done nothing but agree for the last 2 episodes. But anyone that says anything negative about Johnny T-shirt is absolutely sus because Johnny T-shirt, as we know, sponsors this program, sponsors of Inside Carolina podcast, content, you name it. Huge, loyal friends of ours. We want you to be loyal friends of theirs, locally and alumni-owned and operated, East Franklin Street and Chapel Hill. With the beautiful outings in Kenan Stadium this past week, I know there's a lot of folks that stopped by and re-upped their gear and their closet and got some new fits for the season. We're just within a month now of live action with Carolina basketball. You, too, can get some new threads and be ready for basketball, or you can still go ahead and upgrade your football gear. I don't care. It doesn't mind to me. But Johnny T-shirt can take care of that. And if you don't go to Johnny T-shirt, and if you're not an Inside Carolina premium subscriber, and you don't use your extra 10% off, well, then you are also quite sus. So there you have it. That's the bonus round of no cap or sus for this edition of the show. We appreciate Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate you guys participating in the game show phenomenon that is sweeping the nation. We'll let the national gentlemen and ladies come in and run some advertisements to pay some bills, as my cohort Tommy Ashley likes to say. We'll be right back after this to talk a little bit more about some upcoming visits, a little recruiting action, and some new recruiting rankings here on the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. All right, thanks for sticking around. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're a part of our little fam here. I do want to say it was great to meet some folks who listened to the Coast to Coast at the football game the other day. We were doing the IC Live pregame show, which if you do not listen to and you do like football, please check us out at WCHL online. It's chapelboro.com, WCHL's terrestrial radio, or you can watch it on the IC YouTube channels where you're getting this very same podcast. Tommy Ashley and I join every game 3 hours before kickoff till 1 hour before kickoff, at which time we hand it over to the folks at the Tar Heel Radio Network to get you ready to go. But it's a lot of fun. If you're ever in the Bulls lot, as I was saying earlier, some folks came down and said hello that listen to the Coast to Coast. They really appreciate Sean and Sherrell. They hate the host, but they're grateful for what you guys bring on a regular basis. So it was good to meet those folks that came by and said hello, and we hope you continue to listen to us. Gentlemen, as we mentioned earlier, live action with Carolina basketball, and I've gone this far without saying late night, so I'm going to give myself a little Barry Horowitz pat on the back action, is set for October the 13th. Big weekend in Chapel Hill. There's a home football game that day. 7 p.m. Doors are going to open at 5:30. I would like to ask, what do you expect to happen with regard to visits and such going around that, Sherrell?
Well, one we confirmed a couple of days ago was that James Brown, one of UNC's 2024 commitments, is going to take his official visit that weekend. And I don't think he'll be the only one, but that's the one we have confirmed thus far. In the past, I know Carolina, or under Hubert Davis, it's kind of been 3 guys at live action that they've kind of focused on. So I think maybe you'll see that again. Local players come as well if they haven't committed elsewhere to visit. So there's a good crop of young 2025, 2026 players in state. So I think you probably see some of those guys get invites. But, as it gets closer, we'll start confirming that stuff. But right now, the one we have confirmed is that James Brown will be there. And, aside from something crazy, you would assume Drake Powell will be there too. He's already taken 4 unofficial visits, I think, since the year started. So he's going to be on campus a lot.
He's on that Brandon Ingram plan, huh?
Yeah, except for he's going to go to Carolina.
He's going to end up in Chapel Hill. Yeah, I know. I probably crossed some eyes pretty quickly with some folks that might be listening to this. But Sherrell, also this past weekend with UNC hosting Minnesota in football, we did have some visits, both of the or most of the unofficial kind, from some players that came to spend some time on campus. Can you tell us who those were?
Yeah, so Carolina had a few visitors, again, in-state guys. So Drake Powell was obviously there because he's going to be on campus a ton. Also, there was Cole Kluwer, making sure I say his name correctly. He's a 2026, I guess we'll call him wing, guard, wing, forward, versatile player from Orange County High School in Hillsboro. Latrell Allman was also there. He's a 6'8.5", I think, 6'9"-ish big man from Richmond. And then Jackson Keith, a 2025 wing from Southern Durham, was there as well. Keith and Allman both play on Team Loaded on the Adidas circuit, which is also the AAU program of Jalen Withers and Armando Baycott.
So Allman is Allman is which class? 25.
He's 26 as was.
Okay, yeah. All right. So you 226s and 226s, a 25 and a 24.
There you go. Yep.
All right.
So they were all on campus over the weekend. We'll have a story up on Kluwer. You probably actually have already read it, honestly. Hopefully it'll have already been posted by the time you see this. But he had a good time. He had some insights into pickup. He played pickup. Drake did as well. Not sure about Allman if he played or not. And Keith played as well. So it was a good run from what they said, and we'll have additional details. But no offers were given out to either of those guys. But also UNC was at Keith's high school yesterday, and they were also at Kluwer's high school yesterday. So definitely 2 guys to watch in state moving forward.
Sean, I'd like to ask you as well, what can you say about any of those 4? Well, let's tell you what, let's take Drake Powell out of the mix, because we've all talked about him ad nauseum, and we probably will even a little bit later in the show. But Sean, can you tell us about anything about the games of either Jackson Keith, Latrell Allman, or Cole Kluwer?
I think starting with Kluwer, I mean, a lot of people got to watch him during Peach Jam with CP3 making the run in the 15 and under age bracket. I think I'll be interested to see what size does he get to by the time he enters high school. Definitely long and lanky right now. For him, ability to shoot the 3-pointer is probably first and foremost. But I think definitely more than just a shooter, ability to go left and drive hard to the basket. So I think it's going to be fun watching him develop, especially a local prospect. And then Jackson Keith, he played on the 16 and under circuit, but really strong scorer. Played really well at the Adidas tournament out here in California towards the end of the year. Almost an all-star event of sorts. Really, he graded out 95th percentile in terms of efficiency ratings on Synergy, which was fairly surprised at when looking at. So I think one for him, just kind of seeing how he develops, but both of those will be interesting for in-state prospects, just given how talented the 2024 class was and the focus on in-state early on. And 25, that hasn't been the case. 26, starting off just with these two, but kind of the North Carolina, Virginia focus. So we'll be interested to track how that continues, more so in the 2025 class, I'd say.
One thing to add about Kluwer, he's a really good shot blocker. He self-reports at 6'7", and I think it may be just a situation where he's still growing and he's still one of the tallest players even on 15s. But he just has great timing if you watch him play on shot blocking. And I would share this anecdote. He said basically, the YouTube videos where the kids like line up on the wing and try to dunk on each other. He kind of gave credit to that for him becoming a good shot blocker. He was like, we used to go in the driveway, lower the goal to 8.5 feet, and try to dunk on each other. And he's like, my timing got really good because we just did it all day, every day. So I thought that was interesting. But for him, that's something that's really good in addition to the 3-point shot. And then with Keith, he's a really strong, like well-built scorer, and I think there might be questions about athleticism or, some other areas of his game. But in the end, you kind of know he's going to figure out a way on the offensive end to get you 2 points. So that's usually pretty important. And to Sean's point, he's very efficient with it. So definitely, I think we're going to keep a close eye on both of those.
I can't say this for sure, but I feel relatively confident that the image of a kid in like 7th grade trying to block dunks on an 8.5-foot goal is going to endear this young man early on in his recruiting to a lot of fans, regardless of what fan base they claim. Appreciate the rundown there, Sean. I know it's early and it still blows my mind a little to be talking about kids from the 26 class. Yet here we sit. And then the last thing we want to talk about with some recruiting stuff. Sherrell, we saw some new rankings. Sean, I'm going to get each one of you guys to speak to this a little bit, but we've now got 2 UNC commits in the 24 class that are both in the top 10. And I can't remember when the last time that happened. I want to guess it was probably the guys that were on the 09 team. So the 06 class, I get. No, Ellington and Lawson, I feel like are probably it. Is that right, Sherrell? Okay, you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming that means yes.
Yeah, Brandon Wright, Wayne Ellington, and Ty Lawson.
And people totally forget about Brandon Wright because he was such a last-minute addition and was one and done for North Carolina.
And the funny thing is that Elliot Cadell would be top 10 too if he was still in 2024.
So it would be 3, which is that's absurd. Sean, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think it was about these guys' game, and if it was one thing that pushed Drake up in that top 5 spot? We felt like it was coming. We talked with some of the national recruiting guys for 24/7 that hinted that they felt really confident about it. I know you've been very much on the Drake train. Do you think if you could narrow down to one thing that got Drake Powell into that top 5, what was it over the summer?
Well, I mean, I think his performance at Peach Jam in terms of showing his just everything he can do. But I think in terms of what got him into the top 5 was still that potential of what he can do, given the ability to play on both sides, the explosiveness and the size. But I still think, he has a ways to go to, from a productivity standpoint of being that consistent top 5 player. Obviously, he showed a huge growth Going from being ranked in the 50s when he was offered. I think a lot of questions, was he going to get an offer in late July of last year? So I think he showed he did turn that potential into production. But once again, being a top 5 player, no matter how weak or strong the class is still something now that there'll be a target on his back. But that consistency, play great in Peach Jam, play great first session of EYBL in the spring, struggled in some other times, had some other camps where maybe didn't play at that level. So I think what really got him into that top 5 was Peach Jam, as well as the potential of what he can be in 1 to 3 years when you're looking out that way.
And make no mistake about it, it's not just, the fact that he's looked good and has continued to improve. I mean, there are legitimate, NBA folks who, work for NBA teams that are loving and remarking highly about his game. Sure, last question for the night about these new rankings. If you want to go ahead and I'll throw these out, but what I'd like you to speak to, Drake Powell being number 4, Ian Jackson comes in at number 10, and James Brown the third brings his hot pants in at 91. I'd love for you to tell me, what does it mean for North Carolina, for their recruiting profile, for Hubert Davis's clout on the recruiting trail, and then looking forward to the 25 class? What does it mean for UNC to have 2 guys in the top 10 right now?
I think not as much as we probably think, because I think in our minds and some of the fan base's minds, maybe the Carolina brand isn't as strong nationally as it once was. And I mean, to a degree, that's a true statement. But I think the degrees to which it is true is different from what kind of the narrative, I think, among a lot of people is. So basically what I'm trying to say is, like, to kids, it's still like, wow, I got a Carolina offer, or Carolina's interested in me. They're like, that's huge for them. And I think a lot of times the fan base and people who follow this stuff think it doesn't mean as much as it used to. So it's big, it's important, because, you want to have that cool factor. And I think even more so, and nothing against Ian or Drake, more so than those two, I think Cadeau kind of was one that raised a lot of eyebrows, just because of how he plays and how funny he is to play with. Even if the guys in subsequent years probably have no chance of ever playing with him, it just says, Hubert Davis is willing to, let me do me, basically. But do me within the construct of the team. And I think that's an important message. That's one that, even back to Caleb Love and RJ Davis, that has been said over and over. I can't tell you how many times we talked to guards, guys who, we never even published their stories, because Carolina showed little interest or no interest, where it said, man, he gives his guards freedom. Like, look at Caleb Love, and now they've got Elliot Cadeau and Ian Jackson. And so I think just having that cachet among those guys is big. But the part about 2 top 10s, I think that's more for fans, really, and people, media who follow it, than it is for the players, because they see what's on the court and they see what the other players are telling them, and that's how they go about their business.
Well, I was trying to, send everybody out tonight with a big warm fuzzy, but I do appreciate your willingness, not that you're tearing it down, but your willingness to give it to us honestly. And maybe you were kind of splitting the difference and going very mid instead of either no cap or sus there. And I think that honesty is probably a good frame for us to get out of here. Unless Sean's going to hit me with 2 pennies. Sean, you got two cents you want to throw in here before we get out of here for the night?
I do think Ian Jackson at 10 is too low. I know we've talked about how he's been in the spotlight for so long, and I think Adam Finkelstein, when he was on, we went in depth on that. Of it's a little easier for your game to be picked apart. Not saying he's a top 1 or 2 guy, but I think maybe in that 3 to 7 range. So I have higher expectations for him than maybe the number 10 player, which is still pretty high, but just given his scoring ability, I think he's going to be able to bring that from day one. So I'd say that would be the main thing for me. And then I think in general, it's probably been the quietest recruiting really since the spring session. There weren't really any offers that came out of the July periods, which I think we'll double check with Sherrell, but is probably unheard of coming out of the July sessions. And even last year, the Drake Powell came came in July, and he had committed by early September. So I think it'll be interesting to see now with the home football games, who's coming to campus, the coaches out on the road, who are they visiting. 2025, the offers out there have been all been really the top 10 guys, so national guys, not local guys. Who are the ones that they really decide to focus on, and who are the ones that fade away, and then who are those more local guys that start to come in if they're not feeling strong in terms of their placement on several of those players.
For sure. Sherrell, anything else you want to add before we get out of here? I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 pennies, but if you got one, we'll take and add it up.
Just sporadic pennies. So I'd say that the first thing in 2025, they've offered number 1 through 6 in the class and number 17 in the updated ranking. So that tells you where they are there. By the next time we have a coast to coast basketball season, will have started. Practice will have started, because I think we're still in our every other week. And typically the last week in September, which I guess would be, what's today? Today
it'll be 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, so the week of September 25th, at some point that week, practice will start. So it's the off season is kind of over. It happened very quickly. It happened very quickly, but it also felt like 3 years. But the season is here. So
can you see what's on my shirt? You read that?
Yeah, I see it.
There's I see what you did there. You said I see. There is no off season. None. Zero. Less than zero. Absolutely. And Sherrell makes a great point. By the time we get back into our regularly scheduled weekly appearances here on the Coast to Coast, we're going to have real ball to talk about and real practice, and things are becoming more clear. So all of you around ball junkies, stick with us. We've gotten through what has been a pretty busy beginning to the summer, and then things quiet down, as Sean said, a little bit, but it's going to ramp back up here really quickly. I mean, think like raccoon on meth quickly. It's going to be insane really, really soon. So stick around with us. We appreciate you being a part of the show tonight. We will be back as schedule permits, going live. Most likely we'll be doing live when the show goes back to weekly. But again, there's just so much football content right now that we weren't able to do it this week. Regardless, we hope this hit your feed and was a welcome sight for you. Thanks to everybody who listened, who's watching this on YouTube, to John Siegley and to producer John Bauman for producing this stuff and making sure that everything gets out to you guys in your feeds. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring us. Again, if you're not shopping at Johnny T-Shirt, that's a sus decision. I mean, there's nothing else we can say about that. And to Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran for joining us. As always, those guys bring the heat. I'm just here steering the ship. I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina on the Coast to Coast podcast. We'll catch you next time.